All right, welcome to the Blue Collar Wealth Club podcast. I am one of your hosts, Jerry Garcia.
And I am Sheena White.
Fantastic. Well, today we want to talk about the art of delegation. It's a topic that Sheena said she's been discussing very frequently lately with her clients. And so we're going to dig into what it is and why it's important.
Yeah, so a lot of times we think to ourselves, only we can do it, right? Like, if I don't do it, it's not going to get done right. Which might technically be true at first, but you are only one person. And especially, I've even had this with my own self. Jerry can attest. I have, right? He's like, that's why I side-eyeing you. Because I have been really bad at this. And personally, like, I'm good at teaching it, but sometimes we're not good at doing what we can teach.
I'm much better.
Yes. And I was like, no, I don't need an assistant. I'll just work, 10 hours a day. No biggie. Come on. And in the past, a couple months ago, he finally convinced me, and I hired a bookkeeper and an assistant. And then now my assistant is full-time, and it is like for real life changing. Okay. So honestly, does my assistant do everything perfectly the first time? Because she's a human. She's a human, and there's things I'm like, hey, okay, maybe we switch this picture out. Hey, can we do this? Hey, can we do that? It's all about communication, but I'm learning with her, and I realize that I'm learning how to be a better boss and how to be a better delegator as I'm giving things over to her. And I'm learning a lot of trust, and then...
Probably learning a lot about yourself, because I think, having a second person in there just throwing things out there that you may not have thought of sometimes actually expands the way that you do things, or changes the way that you do things, because surrounding some of the other projects that you have going on. And this is kind of what we're talking about. There's a lot of opportunity. A lot of times you think you're the best at everything, when realistically you may not even be the best at everything that you think you are. You just like things a certain way. And once you get past that in your mind, because you've finally taken on that ability to bring somebody else on board, you may find out that maybe your way of doing things wasn't even the best way. And even if it was, you have to sacrifice things maybe working at 80% as well as they did with you in charge, that maybe that 80% allows you to focus your efforts on something else. Now you're working in two different places at once. And that is the key to why delegation is so important.
Yeah. So many people I talk to, they're like, oh, I want a big business. I want to be the CEO. And it's like, well, what does that look like? What is the job of a CEO? And I think I was listening to a podcast, or I was reading a book, I don't remember, one of the two, and they said that the job of a CEO is resource allocation. It's not actually doing any of the direct work. It's just allocating the resources where they need to go, including the resources of humans, and making sure that the resources are allocated in the correct way in a business so that the business grows. So if you're so dead set on being in the muck and in the work of whatever your business is, you will never really be that CEO. The only way to get there is through team, and the only way to have an effective team is through effective delegation.
Yeah, I could think of a perfect example. I think when you're delegating properly, it kind of feels like you're doing nothing.
Right. No, 100%. Yes.
So I can think I belonged to an organization called My High-End Professionals. I had worked on one of the committees. It's all volunteer based. I eventually became chair of the events planning committee, and we ran 3 events per month. And, one of them was very large, 100 to 125 people. We would get out to just network, and it was kind of a happy hour setting. We also had like a lunch and learn type of an event, and that was a very small lunch and learn that was just for 10 people. So there was 10 people to sign up, got to do it. Anyway, one of the first things I did once I took over as chair is we had a meeting with our committee, and I said, all right, let's go over every event. Let's map out, how do these events take place? What has to happen on the front end? What has to happen during? What has to happen after? We broke everything up into individual tasks. And then we just kind of, okay, you take on these 3 tasks, you take on these. And literally the events ran off without a hitch. And I was getting so many compliments, and I actually felt bad, because I'm like, I'm not really doing anything. Like, these guys are handling all the work. I'm just sitting in, and when somebody can't make it or can't fulfill their duty for whatever reason, I'm stepping in and I'm plugging those holes then. But it really felt almost uncomfortable for me to take any praise for what I felt like was doing almost absolutely nothing. And as I've learned since then, that is actually doing the appropriate thing as the leader of that group, as the head of that committee, as the CEO in that case of that particular committee. That's exactly what it should feel like.
Yeah, you were doing the designing. So in the book Clockwork by Mike Michalowicz, he talks about there's 4 different types of work in any business. There's designing, there's deciding, there's delegating, and then there's doing. And he said that in any company, 80% of the work is actually in the doing, but that doesn't mean that as a leader, 80% of your work should be the doing, right? You want to get to the point where literally you're focused on designing. And he even talks about having not just you as the CEO, but your entire C-suite, your entire top level leaders focusing on designing. Where are you going next? What's the next step? What is your strategy to get there? All these different things that you have to design so that you can decide and delegate and then do, but that you have other people that they're there to do the doing. So you have the time and the mental capacity to truly design to your greatest ability.
Well, you think about people who own a lot of businesses. I know we're both fans of the show Shark Tank.
Yes.
I think that's the greatest example because these guys have ownership in however many businesses. How much time do you think they spend? They don't have any more time in a day than the rest of us.
Yeah.
So how do you accomplish that? You accomplish it by doing exactly what we're saying. These guys have money, right? So what they do, they have people come on the show. They need an injection of capital for one reason or another to scale their business, to grow their business. They need the expertise of the people who've done that before, who've done that for other companies. So these guys do that. Here, I will offer you some cash. How much time do you think they spend with each of those businesses? Maybe initially they spend a couple weeks of putting some actual time in. After that, it's check-ins. If you're being the appropriate CEO of your business, you should be meeting with your management team, and your management team can then deal with the rest of your employees. The CEOs of large corporations are not meeting with individual lower level employees all the time. They may have big get-togethers once a year or maybe even once a quarter, but the day-to-day, their operations are dealing with, that's why there's a hierarchy. If you want to be that CEO of your business, you have to actually implement that chain of command and separate yourself from the day-to-day grind of doing whatever the work is. If you want to run an appropriate landscaping business, you really can't be the one out there mowing the grass or digging the hole for the tree or doing whatever it is in that day-to-day and take care of all the back-end work and all the management work that goes along with that.
Yeah. I mean, it's like in the E-Myth when he talks about, you have the tradesman, the manager, and the CEO. And when you start your business, you're all 3. But eventually you need to move into just being the CEO. And also if you want to have a saleable business, right? No one wants to buy your job.
Most of the businesses we talk to are people like you and I. We start off, we're one person. We're just going to do this work, and then we're going to grow it enough that we say, we got a little bit too much work. Let's bring on a second person and take off. Oh, now we need someone to take inbound calls. Oh, now we need a salesperson. And that's how things grow. But the hardest part is taking that person who is just their whole lives been that worker and plucking them out of that role and saying, look, if you want your business to scale, because this is your business, if you want it to scale, you have to be able to remove yourself from that position.
100.
Especially if you want to sell that business. Nobody's going to buy the job. They want to buy a business where they can replace you, who's above the business here, and taking on the responsibilities of the CEO. They don't want to buy the ability to go dig a hole.
Yeah, I mean, even if no matter how much money you're making digging that hole, they don't want to do it. And they want to buy a cash flowing asset, right? And you have to think about, do you really want to do that long term either? You have to relinquish the reins and develop trust with your team. And honestly, I've talked to a lot of people and they're like, well, I'm never going to find anyone good enough. And that's just not true. You can. It's not going to be easy and it's not going to be overnight, but it will always be a worthwhile investment because, when you can step away from your business, like I had one of my clients, he went away for a week. He was completely unavailable. And of course, that's when everything broke. It was like a complete poop festival. And he was unavailable. They couldn't, but the business still went on. And he got back that next week. And there was some stuff he had to step into. And it wasn't that fun of a next week, but it still continued and they're still thriving because he had that team around him to really, he has an amazing COO and she took care of it and making it happen. My point with this story is that that's what you want to strive for, right? Because that's when you know you own a business, not just a job. That's when you know too that you can really scale and you can really go to that next level because you have that team around you that's going to support you, that's going to be there for you, that has the ability to really do what needs to be done in your business.
And we come at this from a position where we actually are buying businesses and we are not looking to dig those holes, find out where maybe there's some inefficiencies in the operations where we have a business that's already established. Mm-hmm. Gotta have a good foundation, got to have a good base. We're not going to buy something that's not already pretty well established. We want to know why the owner is trying to get out of the business. We want to know who's going to stay with the business, who their clients are. We're going to do a lot of digging into figuring out why this business is something that we want to buy. And then our job is to delegate. And one of the best ways you can do that, you hear this a lot, you can't find good help these days. The help is always there. You have to make sure that the person you're bringing on board is aligned with what your goals are. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. You know, one of the ways that we've talked about doing that with the businesses we acquire is to put a great manager in place, a great operator of this business, and then letting them earn an ownership share in the business over time. And then if we decide we want to sell that, give them that first right of refusal to purchase the business from us. Because if we've built it the way that we want to, and they've helped us, then they know what a great asset that business is. And they're going to want to buy that because they can continue what they've already been doing. And now they get to own the business, not just a portion of it, but the actual entirety of that business. And that's one way to make sure that everyone's in a line, everyone's working together. You have to incentivize people when you're delegating to get everyone on the same page. We should all have the same goals and be working toward the same thing. You have to be the difference. You as the person, you as the owner, this is why my company is different. It may not even be something that you offer that's different. It may just be that the feel that you bring to that business, the passion that your employees bring to that business. It's the my pleasure from Chick-fil-A employee,
right?
That is the difference maker from almost every other fast food chain that you approach.
If somebody comes to work for them and isn't willing to say my pleasure to every customer, first of all, they probably won't be hired. But secondly, if they somehow did get through the process, they would be exited out very quickly because that's part of their culture that they are creating within that restaurant. And they're actually a really great example of culture because they have a very strong thought to their values and they are not afraid in the market. You have to kind of take a stand and that will help you to find that team that's going to be there for you to then have the people to delegate the tasks to.
I mean, it seems like such a simple thing, right? My pleasure. The longer you hold on to that control, the longer it will take for your business to scale and thrive. It literally will not until you relinquish some of that control. And one of the things you hear a lot in business is slow to hire, quick to fire.
Don't think, because you had one bad hire that you're bad at hiring or that it's not going to happen, because that's not true. Naturally, you're going to make some mistakes. You're going to hire some poopy people. Maybe they're great other places, but they're just not a great fit for you and for your company and your vision. And that's okay. It's okay to say, ooh.
It's just even the role that you have them. You thought they were a good fit for this role. And as they got into it, maybe they thought they would be good, or maybe they thought they'd like it. And then it turns out that they're not. Quick conversation can be like, I'm not really on board with this. Maybe we need to pivot. I can think of a great example from The Office. If you watch The Office, there's an episode where Sabre has bought them out and we have Michael Scott and Jim Halpert both being co-managers, and they say, look, we're not going to have two of you guys doing one job. One of you needs to be manager. One of you needs to be sales. Long story short, the Michael Scott ends up going into the sales role because he has more experience and he finds out that there's no cap on commissions. Well, they're both end up miserable in their new roles and they end up deciding to flip-flop because, they can still both do those jobs, but they just found out that they didn't like that role very much. It's not necessarily always about letting someone go, but the bigger mistake is to hang on to somebody in a role that they're miserable in, or at all in a company that they're miserable in, for longer than you need to. The longer you let that drag on, the longer that is a weight on your business's growth.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes too, as you're growing, you get to a point where maybe the role has outgrown the person and your business is growing and leaving them behind a little bit, which I see this a lot in certain break points in businesses. Usually there's a break point around 2 million, 5 million, and 10 million. And right in those areas is where you end up having to kind of revamp your entire team. And I actually have a couple clients going through this right now. They're in those break points and they're having a lot of turnover and a lot of changes. And it can be very scary, but it's also really exciting because when you are kind of revamping the way you're doing things in your team and bringing in that fresh blood that can really get to where you want to go, it can help you get past those break points and really give you that oomph for the next level.
Well, a little sidebar too. That's not only true in business, that's true in life. As you decide you want more, bigger, better things, you find that certain people that you used to associate with, that you used to be friends with and used to rely on, may turn on you. They may not do it in your face, but you'll notice that they're around less often and you start to hear some things and that absolutely happens. It's as you're seeking growth, not everyone is comfortable and not everyone is comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so the less comfortable they are, sometimes some people are made for that growth and others aren't. And so that's the difference in when you see that type of growth. Like you said, maybe you need to replace some team members and maybe you end up in life replacing some of the people in your circle.
Yeah. John Maxwell, in one of his books, he calls it the law of the lids. And it's, where there's basically every human has a lid, including yourself. And if you want to level up your own self and your own business, your business will never go above your lid as a leader. So you have to break through that lid and you have to get to the next level. But that's the same for the humans on, especially your management team. They have a lid too. And if you're breaking past yours and the rest of your management team is breaking past yours and there's somebody there who just isn't and who's stuck and who's just banging up against their lid, sometimes you have to make the hard decision and pivot away, because if they can't break through, you can't continue on with them on your team.
And that is one of the things that you won't get to delegate as often, is those hard conversations.
Yeah, that is the one thing that, as I said, we were talking about, CEO is all about allocation of resources. And so you're allocating resources to that person, you're the allocator, so you have to decide not to. And that's your decision, not anybody else's. So get the big bucks, have to have the hard conversations.
Well, I think this has been a very great topic. Led us to a lot of other discussions on things that I think we'll be discussing on other episodes.
Most definitely. Yeah. So get out of your own way, hire some help.
Well, until next time, guys. Thank you.